There is a family in Switzerland that has never once sold a single piece of land in over 200 years. Not during the Great Depression, not during 2 world wars, not during the 2008 financial crisis. Not once. And today, that land is worth roughly 40 times what it was in 1920. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is a specific way of thinking about money that most of us were never taught. And that is exactly what we are going to break down today. I want to be very clear about something before we go further. This video is not about inherited wealth. It is not about trust funds, about silver spoons, or about people who got rich by accident of birth. This is about the mental operating system that keeps wealth alive across generations. Because here's what most people get completely wrong about old money families. They think the money itself is the secret. It is not. Money can be lost. History has proved this over and over. The Vanderbilt family, at the peak of their wealth in the late 1800s, had a fortune equivalent to roughly $185 billion in today's money. By 1973, when 120 of their descendants gathered for a reunion at Vanderbilt University, not a single one of them was a millionaire. One of the most staggering wealth destructions in American history. The money was not the secret, the mindset is, and the mindset can be learned. Let's start with the very foundation. Old money families think about time in a way that most people find almost incomprehensible. You and I were raised to think in short cycles, monthly budgets, annual bonuses, 5-year plans if we are being particularly ambitious. Old money families think in decades at minimum, often in generations. When the Rockefeller family established their first family trust in the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller gave his advisors one simple instruction: preserve the principal forever. Not for 10 years, not for his lifetime, forever. That trust with modifications still operates today. More than a century of compounding, more than a century of strategic reinvestment. That is not a financial product. That is a philosophy made structural. Here is why the time horizon matters so much in practical terms. Take 2 people who each invest $10,000. Person A pulls it out in 5 years when it has grown to $16,000. They feel great. Person B leaves it untouched for 40 years at the same rate. It becomes roughly $450,000. Same starting amount, same rate. One variable: time. Old money families have been letting capital run that second curve for generations. New money and middle-class money keep interrupting the curve. They cash out, they spend, they reset to zero. Here is a real pattern I want you to think about. The average lottery winner who receives a $10 million jackpot is statistically broke within 5 to 7 years. Not because they are irresponsible people, not because they are uneducated people, but because a change in financial circumstance does not change your financial time horizon. You can have $10 million and still think like someone who lives paycheck to paycheck. That is the actual tragedy. Now shift your frame entirely. Every financial decision you make today is not about what you get tomorrow. It is about what your children's children will inherit. That is the operating system. Plant trees whose shade you may never sit under. The practical shift you can make right now before this video is even over is this: make at least one financial decision this year on a 25-year timeline. One, it can be a retirement contribution, a small land purchase, a life insurance policy for your child. Start training your brain to think generationally. Now let's talk about the second pillar, and this one changes everything. Old money does not chase income. Old money builds and holds assets. This distinction sounds simple. It is not. Income is money that flows to you when you work. Assets are things you own that generate money whether you work or not. The middle class has been taught to maximize income. Get a good job, earn a bigger salary, climb the ladder. And that path is not worthless, but it is fundamentally incompatible with generational wealth, because a salary, no matter how large, requires your time. And time is the only thing that cannot be replenished. Consider the Astor family of New York. Their wealth began in the fur trade. But what kept that family wealthy for over a century was not the fur business. It was real estate. At one point in the late 1800s, the Astor family owned an estimated 1/15 of all real estate in New York City. Not stocks, not bonds. Physical land in the most valuable urban market in the Western world. Land that appreciated, land that generated rent, land that could be transferred to the next generation without interruption. Let me give you the math that makes this real. A physician earning $300,000 a year has a strong income. But the moment they stop practicing, for any reason, the income stops. Now, take someone who owns a portfolio of rental properties worth $3 million, generating $180,000 a year in passive income. That income does not care if the owner is asleep, on vacation, or in the hospital. It keeps flowing. And here is the compounding advantage. 20 years from now, that property portfolio might be worth $7 or $8 million. The income grows with it. The physician's earning capacity ages with their body. Old money families teach their children this distinction before they teach them anything else about money. They do not ask their children, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" as a career question. They ask, "What do you want to own?" The reframe is everything. This is also why truly old money families are often the quietest people in any room. You will not find them wearing logo-covered designer brands or posting about their latest luxury purchase. That is a behavior pattern of new money. People who feel a need to signal their wealth because it is new and unfamiliar. Old money has nothing to prove. Their wealth is not in the car, it is in the asset column. Every dollar spent on a depreciating luxury item is a dollar that is not compounding in an asset. They call this stealth wealth. And it is not modesty, it is strategy. The practical shift here is to stop asking, "How do I earn more?" and start asking, "How do I own more?" Even a single rental unit, a dividend portfolio, a fractional stake in a small business, you are building the right habit, even if the scale is small. The habit of ownership is the foundation. Now let's go to something that will challenge a lot of what you were told about education. Old money families do not treat education the way most of us were taught to. This is genuinely counterintuitive. We have all been told that education is the great equalizer. Get good grades, get a degree, get a good job. And that is exactly the problem. That path is designed to produce excellent employees. Old money does not need excellent employees. It needs owners, negotiators, power-literate individuals who understand how wealth flows and how to protect it. Consider what actually happens in these households at the dinner table. A 12-year-old in an old money family does not hear, "Study hard and get into a good college." They hear, "Here is why we structured this business partnership as an LLC instead of a corporation. Here is what a fiduciary duty means and why it matters. Here is why we never sign a contract without a lawyer we trust reviewing it first." These are not academic lessons. These are operational skills. Skills that compound over a lifetime the same way money does. There is a family in Zurich connected to private banking for 4 generations, whose children have been sitting in on quarterly wealth reviews with family advisors since the age of 10. Not to understand everything, but to absorb the language, the rhythm, the culture of wealth management as a natural part of their lives. By the time those children are 30, they do not need to learn how wealth works. They have been breathing it for 20 years. Old money also has a radically different relationship with failure, because their financial security does not depend on any single venture. They allow their children to fail, deliberately. A child loses $200 on a small business idea. The response is not disappointment. The response is, "Tell me what you learned." That lesson is worth 10 times the $200. This is how risk tolerance is built from childhood. Not recklessly, but as a trained and normalized part of life. You do not need to be born into old money to begin educating yourself and your family this way. Start having financial conversations with your children. Study how legal structures work. Read about how wealth was actually built and transferred throughout history. A basic understanding of trusts, business structures, and contracts is more valuable than almost any financial tip you will ever read. Now let us talk about something that sounds simple, but is one of the most powerful forces behind generational wealth. The network. There is a reason old money families send their children to specific schools, not just for academic excellence, for the relationships. The child sitting next to your son in a boarding school dorm in 1995 might be running a sovereign wealth fund in 2025. That is not nepotism. That is strategic relationship infrastructure built 30 years in advance. Old money families treat their social networks the way a sophisticated investor treats a portfolio. Every relationship is an asset. Every favor given is a credit. Every gathering attended is a maintenance touchpoint on a long-term investment. Country clubs, charitable foundations, private societies, family office consortiums, these are not social activities. They are power maintenance systems. There is also something critically underappreciated about the quality of advisors surrounding these families. A wealthy old money family does not call a financial advisor from a chain firm when making a major decision. They call a private wealth manager whose family has served their family for 40 years, a lawyer who helped their grandfather structure a trust, an accountant who knows every asset, every structure, every vulnerability in their financial picture. The quality of counsel in those situations is categorically different from anything available to most people, and that counsel compounds in quality over decades. You can begin building a powerful network without old money access. Be intentional. Join organizations where ambitious, disciplined people gather. Give value before you ask for anything. Maintain relationships consistently over years, not just when you need something. Think of your professional relationships as long-term assets that require regular investment. Now let us go somewhere most financial channels will not take you. The old money relationship with debt. Most of what we were taught about debt is avoid it, pay it off, cut the card. And for consumer debt, that advice is correct. But old money has an entirely different philosophy when it comes to leveraged investment debt. They use it as a precision tool for wealth amplification. Here is the distinction that matters. Bad debt buys things that lose value. Good debt buys assets that outperform the cost of borrowing. Old money families never touch the first kind. They are extraordinarily sophisticated users of the second. Let's make it concrete. You find a commercial property worth $4 million in a growing city. It generates $250,000 in annual rent and appreciates at roughly 5% per year. You could buy it outright with cash. Or you could borrow $3 million at a 4% interest rate, costing you $120,000 per year, and deploy only $1 million of your own capital. Your net rental income after the interest cost is still $130,000. On $1 million of deployed capital, that is a 13% cash return, plus the asset appreciation. The wealthy do not borrow because they are stretched. They borrow because they understand leverage. This is why the most sophisticated real estate dynasties often carry enormous debt loads, not as a sign of trouble, as a sign of deliberate expansion. The practical lesson here is to begin separating debt into two categories in your own mind. Consuming debt, which is always a trap, and investing debt, which can be a powerful tool when managed carefully. You cannot play offense with leverage until you have secured your defense. Build your financial buffer first, then learn the tool. Now we arrive at the pillar that almost no one talks about because it is invisible from the outside. Emotional discipline. Old money families do not make financial decisions based on fear or excitement. They make them based on structure, analysis, and long-term frameworks built over decades. Think about what happened in March 2020 when markets collapsed almost 40% in a matter of weeks. Average investors panicked. They sold. They locked in losses. They let fear make irreversible decisions. The wealthiest, most established family offices in the world did the opposite. They bought. Not because they were not feeling the pressure, but because they had built governance structures specifically designed to prevent emotion from entering financial decisions. Many old money family offices have formal investment committees with rules. No major decision can be made by a single person. No buy or sell during a market crisis for the first 30 days. All decisions must be cross-referenced against the long-term plan. These are not just policies. They are emotional guardrails, built in advance precisely because these families understood that emotion is the single greatest destroyer of generational wealth. The Vanderbilt fortune, remember that story from the beginning? Almost every major loss in that family's history can be traced back to emotional decisions. Spending to impress, investing to chase excitement, competing for status rather than building structure. Old money families teach their children to be bored by wealth, not in a dismissive way, in a structural way. Wealth is not exciting. It is a system. Systems are maintained, not celebrated. This is why old money culture often appears reserved, understated, almost clinical about money. That is not a personality quirk. That is a survival strategy. One of the most powerful things any person building wealth can do right now is create a simple investment policy statement for themselves. Write down your financial goals. Write down your rules. What will you invest in? What you will never touch? What market conditions will not change your behavior? Then commit to reading that document before making any financial decision over $5,000. You're installing an emotional guardrail. You are doing what old money families build into their governance by default. Let us bring everything together now. The old money mindset is not a collection of tips. It is an architecture. Time horizon is the foundation. Asset ownership is the structure. Education as a power system is the walls. Strategic networking is the infrastructure. Sophisticated use of capital and debt is the engine. And emotional discipline is the roof that holds everything together, without which the whole thing collapses in a storm. Here is the honest truth. You do not need a 100-year-old trust fund to adopt this architecture. You need to change the questions you are asking. Stop asking, how do I earn more this year? Start asking, what can I own that outlasts me? Stop asking, what is the hot investment right now? Start asking, what will still be valuable in 50 years? Stop asking, how do I look financially successful? Start asking, how do I actually become financially resilient? Every person watching this right now is one generation away from starting something that could last. You do not need to have inherited the mindset, you need to choose it, and then pass it down. That is how dynasties begin. Not with a fortune, with a decision. If this video gave you one thing to think about differently, I want to know what it was. Drop it in the comments below. And if you want more content that goes this deep on wealth systems and the real psychology behind money, make sure you are subscribed, because this is just the beginning.